Have you ever felt her slowly slipping away? Not with a fight, not with words, but with silence that gets louder every day. That quiet shift where her eyes stop searching for you, where her energy pulls back, and you're left wondering what you did wrong, without ever getting an answer. Before we go deeper, take a second, subscribe and like this video, because what you're about to hear, most men never get told, and it changes everything. Listen carefully. Attraction doesn't die in one moment. It fades through patterns, subtle behaviors, small missteps repeated over time until they quietly erase the version of you she was once drawn to. And older men, despite experience, often make one critical mistake. They assume their age alone carries value. But here's the truth you were never told. Younger women are not attracted to age. They are attracted to energy, emotional control, direction, and presence. Age only amplifies those traits if you have them, and exposes you brutally if you don't. When a younger woman loses interest, it's rarely random. It's psychological. She begins to feel something is off. Maybe you're trying too hard to impress. Maybe you're seeking validation in subtle ways. Or maybe you've unknowingly stepped out of your masculine frame and into a space where she no longer feels challenged or emotionally engaged. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. Many men don't notice the shift until it's too late. They keep giving more, texting more, explaining more, believing effort will fix what attraction no longer supports. But attraction doesn't respond to effort, it responds to perception. The moment she perceives you as predictable, emotionally needy, or trying to win her approval, something inside her disconnects. Not because she's cruel, but because her psychology is wired to respond to strength, mystery, and emotional stability, not over-explanation and over-investment. You might think you're showing care. She might feel pressure. You might think you're proving your worth. She might feel the absence of it. And the most dangerous part? These mistakes feel right while you're doing them. That's why they're fatal. Because you don't see the damage as it happens. You only feel the loss after it's done. And this is where most men break without even realizing it. When she starts to pull away, your instinct kicks in. Not your awareness, not your understanding, your insecurity. You start scanning her behavior like a detective trying to solve a case that's already been emotionally decided. You notice she replies slower. You notice the tone has changed. You notice she doesn't ask you the same questions she used to. And instead of stepping back, you lean in harder. More messages, more explanations, more emotional availability than she ever asked for. And here's the psychological shift you don't see happening in real time. The more you chase clarity, the more confusion you create in her attraction system. Because attraction in younger women is deeply tied to emotional polarity. When she feels you are slightly out of reach, she stays engaged. When she feels she has fully figured you out, she starts to detach. Not because she wants to hurt you, but because certainty kills curiosity. And curiosity is the fuel of emotional interest. Older men often assume consistency means reassurance. But in attraction psychology, excessive consistency without emotional depth becomes predictability, and predictability becomes invisibility. Let me say that clearly. When she can predict your emotional response to everything she does, she no longer feels challenged by your presence. And once challenge disappears, so does emotional tension. And once tension disappears, interest starts to decay. This is why some men lose women, not because they did something wrong in a dramatic way, but because they did too much in a safe way. You became available at every moment she needed space. You became understanding when she needed mystery. You became emotionally open when she needed restraint. And slowly, without realizing it, you turned yourself into a comfort zone instead of a compelling presence. But here's what makes this even more painful to hear. She doesn't consciously decide to lose interest. It happens below awareness. A feeling she can't explain. A shift she can't justify. She just knows something inside her stopped leaning toward you and started leaning away. And once that internal shift happens, no amount of effort can reverse it in the same dynamic. Because attraction doesn't reset through logic, it resets through perception change. And if your behavior keeps reinforcing the same perception, she doesn't come back closer. She continues to drift further. And now I want you to understand something most men never accept until it's already too late. Attraction is not stable. It is responsive. It reacts to how you make her feel in your presence, not how much you care about her. When a younger woman starts losing interest in an older man, it is often because the emotional frame has quietly shifted. At first, she may have seen you as grounded, experienced, different from men her age. There was intrigue, a sense of depth, a feeling that you were not easily influenced. But over time, something subtle changes. You start trying to maintain the connection instead of maintaining yourself, and she feels it. Not through your words, but through your energy. You begin to prioritize the outcome, her attention, her replies, her validation, over your own internal state. And the moment that happens, your emotional center moves outside of you and into her reactions. That is where attraction collapses, because now she is no longer interacting with a man who is self-contained. She is interacting with a man who is emotionally tracking her approval. And women, especially younger women, are extremely sensitive to this shift. They may not articulate it, they may not even consciously recognize it, but they feel the change in polarity. The dynamic becomes unbalanced. Instead of feeling drawn toward you, she starts feeling responsible for your emotional direction. And that responsibility kills attraction faster than conflict ever could. This is why arguments sometimes maintain interest more than excessive agreement. Conflict creates emotional contrast. Overcompliance creates emotional flatness. And flatness is the beginning of disconnection. You might think being easygoing is attractive, but when easygoing turns into emotional passivity, when your opinions soften just to avoid tension, when your presence adapts too much to keep her comfortable, she stops experiencing you as a man with a defined psychological edge. And without that edge, there is nothing pulling her forward anymore. Only familiarity, only predictability, only emotional neutrality. And neutrality is not where attraction lives. It's where it disappears quietly. And here is the part that hurts the most for many men to hear. She doesn't lose interest because you are not enough. She loses interest because the emotional experience of being with you stops evolving. At the beginning, there was tension, curiosity, a sense that she was discovering you layer by layer. You weren't fully available, and that created space for imagination. And imagination is where attraction grows fastest in younger women. But over time, something shifts in your behavior. You start to become more present than necessary, more available than required, more emotionally transparent than the connection can actually hold. And what once felt like depth starts to feel like saturation. There is a psychological principle at play here. When emotional input exceeds emotional demand, value perception decreases. In simple terms, when she gets more access to you than she is emotionally investing in, her brain stops assigning you the same importance. This is not about playing games. It is about balance. Because attraction requires space to breathe. It needs uncertainty, not confusion. It needs emotional contrast, not emotional overload. But many older men make a silent mistake here. They assume that giving more of themselves will secure the bond. So they offer consistency, reassurance, explanations, emotional check-ins, believing this will deepen connection. But instead, it flattens it. Because now she is no longer engaging her imagination. She is no longer wondering about you. She is no longer leaning in to understand you. Everything is already available. And when everything is available, nothing feels valuable. This is where you begin to notice subtle changes. She laughs less at your messages. Her responses become shorter. Her curiosity fades. She no longer initiates emotional depth, and you start thinking she is busy. But the truth is harder. She is no longer emotionally expanding toward you. She is emotionally settling away from you. And the more you try to close that gap by giving even more attention, the more you reinforce the imbalance that created the distance in the first place. Because you cannot fill an attraction gap with availability. You can only rebuild it with presence, direction, and emotional self-containment. Without that shift, she doesn't come back into interest. She simply completes the emotional exit you didn't see coming. And now we reach one of the most dangerous mistakes older men make without even realizing it. They start over-explaining themselves. At first, it seems harmless. You want clarity, you want understanding, you want to make sure she doesn't misunderstand your intentions. So you begin to justify your actions, clarify your feelings, and fill in every silence with words that are meant to protect the connection. But psychologically, something very different is happening. Every time you over-explain, you are signaling uncertainty, not about her, but about yourself. And uncertainty is one of the fastest ways to dissolve attraction in a younger woman's mind, because she is not only listening to your words, she is reading your emotional structure. And when that structure becomes reactive, when you are constantly responding instead of leading the emotional tone, you shift from being the man she is drawn to into the man she has to emotionally manage. That is a critical turning point. At first, she may still respond. She may still engage, but internally, she begins to reclassify you. Not as a challenge, not as a mystery, but as emotionally accessible in a way that no longer creates tension. And without tension, attraction loses its charge. This is where many men unknowingly make things worse. They sense distance and try to fix it through communication. More honesty, more vulnerability, more reassurance. But vulnerability without grounding does not create closeness. It creates emotional weight. And emotional weight in early or unstable attraction dynamics does not pull her closer. It pushes her away. Because now she feels something shifting in the relationship that she did not ask for. A sense of emotional responsibility. A subtle pressure to respond in a way that keeps you stable. And younger women especially tend to withdraw from that feeling rather than engage with it. Not because they lack empathy, but because attraction is not built on caretaking. It is built on emotional polarity, on the feeling that you are steady within yourself, not dependent on her reactions to define your state. When that polarity collapses, she no longer feels like she is stepping into something exciting. She feels like she is stepping into something heavy. And instead of leaning in, she starts pulling back. Quietly, gradually, and almost always without explanation. And this is the moment most men completely misread the situation. They think she is confused. They think she needs time. They think if they just stay consistent enough, patient enough, understanding enough, she will eventually come back to how she was at the beginning. But what they don't realize is this. She is not lost in confusion. She is already in clarity, just not the clarity you want to hear. When a younger woman begins to detach, she rarely does it loudly. There is no announcement, no dramatic ending at first. Instead, there is a slow internal conclusion forming in her mind, while her behavior becomes quieter, lighter, and more emotionally distant. And the most dangerous part? She often still treats you with kindness while she is leaving. That kindness is what confuses men the most, because they interpret politeness as potential. They interpret warmth as interest. They interpret familiarity as recovery. But psychologically, what you are seeing is not reconnection. It is closure without conflict. And this is where older men often intensify their efforts. They try to reintroduce excitement. They try to become more attentive. They try to remind her of the early version of the connection. But you cannot recreate emotional momentum by revisiting its beginning. Because she is no longer experiencing you from the same emotional position she once had, her perception has already shifted. And perception is what drives attraction, not memory. So when you try harder at this stage, it doesn't revive attraction. It exposes desperation. And desperation changes everything instantly. It removes mystery. It removes polarity. It removes the sense that you are operating from your own grounded center. And instead, it signals that you are now reacting to her withdrawal. This is why many men feel like they are losing control at this stage. Not because she is doing anything dramatic, but because their emotional stability is now dependent on her responses. And the more unstable you become, the more she stabilizes her distance. Not out of cruelty, but out of emotional self-protection. Because what once felt light and engaging now feels like something she needs to carefully manage. And once a woman starts managing the emotional state of a connection instead of enjoying it, the connection is already over in her mind. And now we arrive at the truth that changes everything, if you are willing to face it without ego. Because at this point, it is no longer about her behavior. It is about the version of you that was present throughout the entire dynamic. Most men think the loss of interest is caused by one final moment, one message, one mistake, one shift in tone. But in reality, it is the accumulation of small emotional signals that slowly reshape how she experiences your presence. And when those signals consistently point in the same direction, uncertainty, overinvestment, emotional chasing, over-explaining, or lack of grounded presence, the outcome becomes predictable long before it becomes visible. But here is what you must understand clearly. This is not about becoming colder. It is not about becoming distant. And it is not about pretending not to care. Those are misunderstandings that lead men further away from real connection. What actually matters is whether your emotional center stays within you or moves outside of you. Because the moment your internal stability starts depending on her reactions, her attention, or her validation, the dynamic changes permanently, and she feels it. Not consciously, not logically, but instinctively. That is why attraction is so difficult to fake and so easy to lose. It lives in the way you hold yourself when things are uncertain. It lives in whether you remain composed when attention shifts. It lives in whether you continue moving forward in your own life instead of pausing emotionally to chase what is fading. And here is the final truth most men resist. If she loses interest because of these patterns, she is not the problem, and neither is she the prize to win back. She is simply responding to the emotional experience you were creating, which means the real question was never about how to get her back. The real question is whether you recognize the patterns that made you lose yourself in the first place. Because when you fix that, when your presence becomes grounded, self-contained, and direction-driven again, you stop experiencing the same cycle in every connection. Not because women change, but because you do. And the moment you change your internal frame, you stop chasing clarity from others and start becoming the source of it yourself.